Welcome back to Hammers Chat, everyone. Mitch here, just bringing you my review on our West Ham American tour. Last night, in the early hours of the morning, the final whistle went for our final friendly of the American tour, bringing it to an end. I watched both games, both of them actually after. I wasn't foolish enough to stay up. I was able to catch replays, mainly on Facebook, on people's Periscope, so I could watch it at a reasonable time in the morning. So anyway, let's begin. The first game, we only played two friendlies whilst we were out there, and the first one was against MLS side Seattle Sounders, who are quite a big MLS side. The game ended 3-0 to Seattle, so it wasn't a fantastic result, obviously. I feel really sorry for those who stayed up till 2 in the morning to actually watch it. So all I can say about that game really is that we started off really well in both halves. Which is what you'd imagine in the pre-season tour, because the players aren't fully up to scratch. They aren't as fit as they were, say, 2 months ago. They need to get up and running again. So you could almost predict a bit of fatigue as both halves went on and as the game went on as well. All 3 goals from Seattle, in my opinion, actually could have been prevented by the goalkeepers. I think for me, both keepers, Adrian and Spiegel, were perhaps the worst players on the pitch. The first Seattle goal was a penalty. The ball was sort of rolling into the box. Adrian came out, missed the ball completely, wiped out the Seattle striker. Bam, right side of the goal. 1-0 Seattle. That could have been prevented easily. It was clumsy from Adrian, but it's only a friendly, so we can't criticise too much. Then the second goal was a ball whipped in from a free kick from Seattle on the left wing, I think it was. It came in, looped in. A Seattle player sort of headed it, and it came off him, and Spiegel, because they had subbed Adrian off of Spiegel at this point, Spiegel sort of went to try and save it, just sort of open his body up. It sort of hit him, I think it was either in the throat or in the chin. It was a really weird sort of save, and you'd expect maybe I'm being a little bit picky here, but you would expect, if that was Adrian for example, I would expect him to be able to have quicker reactions to push it to his side, just go like that basically, just swipe it, but sort of Spiegel sort of opened his body and it just sort of hit him in the face, and I was like, really? And then it sort of was all a bit scrambly, and then it went in, but again, I think it's a goal that could have been prevented. And then the third one is, I think, definitely preventable by Spiegel. The ball there's a bit of a tussle between, I think it's Doniel Henry and whoever the Seattle striker is or was playing at the time. So they sort of run into boxes. It's weak defending from Henry, I think. You'd expect someone who's been training for a Premier League club for a couple of seasons to be able to hold his own against a second-rate MLS striker. But Spiegel sort of, when you see top keepers, they'll come out and make themselves big. Spiegel just sort of stands at his front post, and the Seattle striker could just plods it past him. You'd expect a Premier League keeper to be coming out to try and meet that ball, make himself big and get a block in. So it was a disappointing game. It was quite slow. It was quite boring, to be honest. There are positives from it though. I think the new West Ham striker, Tony Martinez, a youngster, I think he's only just turned 19. He had quite a good game. His movement was really good. He was actually very unlucky not to get a goal. Faguli, who also played very well in that game, by the way, at least I think, in terms of how well you can play in a friendly without going full pout. Faguli made a fantastic run in, and he sort of got knocked off balance and scooped a really hard and a great pass. He sort of scooped it up, and then it broke the back four of Seattle, and I think it was the left back of Seattle would sort of come into a bit to try and meet Faguli, and Faguli had sort of just scooped it past him. Martinez again held his run, stayed onside, forced a good save from the Seattle keeper, and then on the rebound went to go sort of tap it in, but it was a great block from the Seattle defender, so he was unlucky not to get a goal. I think that another player who stood out from him, who's also a new signing, so perhaps this is some promising news, was Norviet, I think that's how you pronounce it anyway. I think he's Icelandic. The Icelandic centre back slash sorry, I got a sore throat. Slash defensive midfielder. He was sort of getting on the ball and spraying passes everywhere, which is what you like to see. So that's one. That's another positive. It's a signing I'm looking forward to seeing. He was a regular for Borussia Mönchengladbach, and they're a very decent German side, and he did play very well for them as well. So I think actually getting him on the free could be a bit of a bargain for us. So now on to the second game, which I said earlier on in the video. It finished in the early hours of this morning. It was against the Carolina RailHawks, who I've never heard of before, to be honest. Never even heard of them. I don't know if I don't think they're an MLS team. I'm pretty sure they're not. But maybe they're an NCAA college team, or perhaps, I don't know if the MLS has a Division 2. Maybe they're a Division 2 MLS team. So anyway, the game finished 2-2. So at least we got to see some Hammers goals, unlike the Seattle game, which is good. Maybe for those who stayed up to watch it, it was perhaps a little bit more worth it. Although after watching the full game on Periscope, it was a pretty slow and pretty boring game. There wasn't really. Again, it was like the first one. It was just very slow. We played quite decent football along the ground. And that's what I will say. The only thing in terms of style of play, which I've noticed over these two friendlies, and in friendlies this early on especially, we can't really pick up too much on any changes in the style of play from Bilic. It was along the floor with the occasional long ball, quite similar to last season. We were very attacking, as you'd expect against teams like these. So it wasn't like we were trying to play the counter-attack like we did a few times last season or anything like that. So there were a few players I was impressed with. One of them who hasn't got much credit for the second game, who I actually want to give a bit of praise to now, is Martin Samuelsson, the young winger slash attacking midfielder, centre attacking midfielder. I thought that although he didn't do much, but when you consider his age, I think his movement was actually really good. If you sort of keep an eye on him, the way he moves is actually quite similar to Payet. He'll usually stay on the left or the right wing, mainly the left in this pre-season tour. And then he sort of drifts inwards a little bit, and then he might come back out. So let's say, depending on what the defence are doing, he might say he's got the ball on the wing, he passes it back to the fullback. Then sometimes he might drift in and just look for that little pocket of space like Payet does. So I was really impressed with him actually. He holds the ball up quite well. He's got a few skills which you will like to see. So it's definitely, as most Hammers know, he's one to keep an eye out for in the future. For me, the standout player in that RailHawks game was most definitely new boy Feghouli, the Algerian winger who we signed on a free. He just moved to us from Valencia a couple of weeks back. He was actually pretty impressive. He's good on the ball, he's pacey, he's got a skill, he knows how to pass. And it was Winston Reid and Andy Carroll who scored the goals, by the way, for West Ham. And with Carroll's goal in particular, Feghouli made a run down the right wing, and with his right foot, he sort of made a sweeping pass on the floor. He just sort of like drilled it in, and it came across the face of the goal. It was a wonderful pass, and Carroll does what he does best and just slotted it away. But to be honest, as much as I rate Carroll, I sort of I heard that he'd scored, I was like, oh, it's probably a header. But it wasn't. It was a well taken left-footed finish. He just sort of tapped it in past the keeper. But the standout for that goal was the Feghouli pass. So looking back at what happened, I suppose the ultimate question of the review is, do I think the pre-season tour in America was worth it? And to be honest, I don't think it was. We had travelled thousands of miles, taken a few of the first team with us, and we've just sort of gone there and we've played teams, one of them nobody's ever even heard of before. And then we played Seattle Seahawks, or an MLS team, and they even put out their reserves as well. So I just sort of feel like perhaps it was more of a marketing thing from the club just to try and expand the fan base. But I've never been a fan of these long distance pre-season tours, especially in countries like America and Australia that we wouldn't really consider footballing nations, and I'll tell you why. It's mainly for the new players and the young players who haven't played in the Premier League before, or perhaps in the case of the new players, haven't played English football before. So we're giving them a taste of football that's completely different to the one here in the Premier League. Like, Feghouli played very well, for example, so is he now going to be overconfident and expect every Premier League game or every game in the FA Cup or the League Cup to be a walk in the park against part-time American players. I just feel much more comfortable to see, like we saw with Pyatt last season with against Southend, where he had an absolute blinding game. For me, if Faguli was to do that against the Southend, or we've got Peterborough coming up, for me that just makes me feel a lot more confident in them, and it probably instills more confidence in them as well, because they can sort of be like, right, I know what I need to do to adapt to the English game now. Whereas they're not really, especially youngsters as well, they're not really going to learn anything from playing, what they call Carolina RailHawks, are they? I much prefer it when we save energy, we don't travel all that way, and then we keep it in the UK so that the new signings and the youngsters can adapt to English football as quickly as possible. So that's it for this video. I just wanted to keep you guys updated and give you my personal thoughts on the American tour. We will have a tour of Austria coming up. For those of you who don't know, I think it was last week the club announced that we will be going to Austria to play a few teams like Rubin Kazan, the Russian team. We'll be playing teams like that. A few European teams, so it'll be perhaps a better experience for the youngsters and the new signings, see how they adapt to European football. So yeah, keep an eye out for that video. I'm not too sure when it'll be coming. It'll be coming sometime after the Austrian tour, obviously. And we'll also most probably have a preview video as well coming up for it, which will obviously happen before the pre-season tour begins. Anyway, that's it from me. Please subscribe down below and hit the like button as well, and please share our videos if you did enjoy them. We also have a forum going, which I'll put a link down below as usual, so please check that out. It's easy to register and it's really fun to use. We have some really interesting topics going on there all the time. So thanks for watching, and keep an eye out for the next video here on Hammer's Chat.